Hi everybody, I'm Amy, this is my wife Maggie, and together we are ThinkerThemer, and we're back with another episode of 10, out of 10. It's been a little while actually.
It has, yeah. We've been busy with other videos, I guess.
We've been really busy because we came back from Gen Con with so many games. I think it was like 60 or 70 games that we came back with.
I was feeling really optimistic. I was like, I don't think we got that many this time. It's like, I think actually we broke a record.
Yeah, I think it was a lot. You know what? It's because there's so many small games at the moment. Lots of card games going on. And so we've been busy just playing behind the scenes. We've been playing so much, but you know, even because we're playing so much, it's so hard to get to 10 games where we've been able to play them enough times to be able to think about a rating for them. But we do have 10 games for you today, and we need to move on because Essen Spiel.
Yes, around the corner.
Just around the corner.
There's going to be even more games.
More games. Who can keep up? But anyway, let's get straight into it. So the first game we're going to talk about is Cities, and this was such a hot title at Gen Con.
It really was, yeah.
Everybody was lining up for it, and it's by fellow Australian Phil Walker-Harding and Steve Finn, so a power duo of designers.
Yes, and it's one of those games where the actual implementation is fairly straightforward, but it's quite crunchy in its making. Essentially, you are building your own little city, and the way that you're going to do that is you're going to be creating this sort of 3x3 grid. On your turn, you're going to be placing your little worker on one of 3 different rows, 4 different rows, I should say. So you're either going to be selecting one set of the actual grids that determine what type of terrain is going to be underneath each one of the little squares, or you're going to be selecting a set of buildings, so actual 3D plastic buildings that can also stack on top of each other, so you can end up kind of going much, much higher. Then you also have these little features that are kind of like elements that can go in parks or in the water areas, and then you also, the other option is going and selecting the end game objectives. So each round, essentially, you're going to be getting, every player is going to be getting one of each. So it's an interesting kind of dynamic of going, once you've picked from that row, that's it. Like, you've selected from that row and everyone else can kind of go, oh, okay, so they're out. So it means that everything that's left there, I'm going to have my pick.
Yeah, so it is the timing. It's looking at the options that are available in each row and deciding, like, in what order do I want to pick from each of these rows. There's also a featured city that you select that it clicks into the top of the board, which is kind of cool, and it represents a city around the world. So Mexico City, Sydney's in there, and then it has 3 group objectives that are going to be a kind of a race. So whoever achieves it first is going to get the most points, and those are really thematic to the city.
Yeah, they are.
So even though the game itself, when you're building out a 3x3 grid, extremely kind of abstract, but it's the objectives, the things that they ask you to do that relates to how that city looks in real life. That's where the theme really comes in, and I really appreciated that as well, because it's actually fun to choose, oh, I love that city, and it mentions this suburb, and it does look like that in real life.
So it makes recreate some of the key features of that particular city, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and I like the tension in the order in which you're going to draft things. This is a game that's going to be really easy to get to the table. It's a quick teach. And then, you can also stack those objectives. So the cards that you're going to get 9 of those over the course of the game. And a lot of them are duplicated as well. So you can really just stack
double
those
down,
and really focus your puzzle as well. The little features are kind of cool as well, because that's a set collection where you're looking for differentiation. The more different the features, the more
and some of them are more rare than others. We had Amy's like, one of the earlier games, she's like, I remember seeing a card that had the distribution of these, and we couldn't find it. And I was like, no, you must have dreamt it. No, I think it's pretty even distribution. And then eventually we found it kind of hidden underneath. So I was like, no, some of them are more rare. Which again adds to the tension of, if you see them, you might go, ooh, maybe I'll go for that row first and grab those.
Yeah, but ultimately this game is a little bit light for me. It's a game that I will enjoy playing if it's there on the table, absolutely. Is it a game I need to keep in my collection? Maybe not, because there's just not enough meat on the bones for me. I'll give it a 7.3. I don't think I'll be probably thinking about it afterwards and that kind of thing. It's just a game that is really accessible. So if you're looking for a gateway style game, then Cities is a great option.
I'm interested, even though it is quite an abstract gameplay experience, I give it a higher rating. It's I believe I give it a 7.8 from me.
7.8?
Yeah,
that's really high.
It's and it's not because it's thematic. I just find it really sort of, it's simple, satisfying, and because the gameplay is fairly intuitive or quick It's like, oh yeah, you're just sort of taking that row and then you kind of create. I think it's a creative element, the fact that you have that freedom of like, how am I going to make my grid and what's going to go where. So yeah, it's something, I agree. Like, it's not one that I would be like, oh my goodness, I have to keep this in my collection, but and thoroughly enjoy every game.
Solid design. That is Cities.
All right, for our next game, we're going to move on to a smaller box. That is Lone Wolves.
I am so excited to talk about this game. I've been waiting to talk about it on the channel. I've been playing it a ton with so many different people. I love this game. I talked about it a lot on a recent Board Game Geek podcast episode with Candace Harris, which she loves the game as well. So listening to that last section of the podcast was just both of us hyping up this game. But I want to talk about it. It is a 2-player only trick-taking game. And it might just be I have to think about it for a bit, but I think that this might be my number 1 2-player trick-taking game ever.
Wow.
I just adore it. So the way that it works is you are setting up a board between the 2 players that represents the 5 different suits that are on the cards. And the cards that you have range from 2 to 7. And the little twist about the 2 is that it always beats the 7 in a trick. So it doesn't beat any other card, but it will beat the 7. And that is important information. And what you're going to be doing is one by one, you're going to be playing a trick that consists of only 2 cards, but the lead player is going to place the card that they want to play in front of one of the territories or areas on the board. Now, the other player can play a card onto any of the other territories. They don't have to match the same territory. But the key is whoever wins the trick is going to leave their card face up, and the value of the card becomes the strength that they're contributing to that territory. Whereas the loser of the trick is going to have to turn their card over, and suddenly it becomes a value 1. So it's low strength in that territory, and it's called a lone wolf. But the benefit of the benefit of losing the trick is that you get to take one of these tokens that's on the territory, and these tokens are going to give you benefits like increasing the strength you have in a territory, increasing the victory points that you get for certain conditions. They're going to allow you to manipulate the game state in certain ways. And so it's important to know when to lose a trick to get those benefits. But because at the end of the game, you can only have a maximum of 6 cards in each territory, and the person who has the most strength is going to get the victory point marker that is there. So there's this like area majority kind of game going on. But then the really interesting part, because this game has so many layers, is that at the start of the game, there are no trump cards. So all of the suits are the same, it's must follow. But there is an evolving trump that comes into it. So when an area gets cleared of the 3 bonus tokens that you take when you lose a trick, it becomes the trump. So you're also strategically thinking about, where do I want to lose? Because that area, if I can clear out those bonus tokens, suddenly that becomes the trump. I've got a lot of that card in my hand, and so now I'm going to take control of this game.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. And then when you clear out another 3 bonuses, actually the old trump goes away and a new trump comes in. And so even because a game like this, really what you want to be doing is you want to be winning a lot of tricks, because then you're keeping control, then you're getting the most strength in each territory. But because of the way the trump works, it does allow you to take back control. And I really, really love this game. There's like lots of layers to be thinking about.
There's a lot of layers. Those tokens, which I believe they're called scar tokens, just like when you lose, you kind of leave with a scar, but you've got a bit of a power, and sometimes you get to sort of decide. Some of them, like, you can kind of like turn over the amount of points that an area is going to get, so it can also give you a bit of. I had a very different experience with this game, because it's very player versus player.
It is,
because it is, it's got that too, but it's very like you're kind of like fighting in very specific areas. And I think because there's like all of those other layers, and those layers obviously, it's interesting because I love trick taking, but I don't enjoy that head-to-head confrontation. I did not find myself having a good time.
No, you were having a horrible time.
I was like, I don't get it. I don't get it, and I don't care. I was getting like stroppy and annoyed, and so I think, and it is that sort of like the PvP element of it, because it does become very like ooh, like immediately, and then kind of go, oh, maybe I'll get you over here, and and so I just sort of went into that too mean space for me, like where I don't like going into that space myself.
It can feel a little bit mean. I really like in this game that often if you know the game and the other person doesn't, obviously you will completely destroy them in the first game. But by the second game, every single person I've taught it to, maybe bar Maggie.
Because I'm like, I want to play this.
In the second game, the scores are really close. And I love that because you get to see that moment where the light goes on and people are like, oh, I get what we're doing here. And I just love the layers of strategy that come with that. So first you're just trying to win tricks, and then you're trying to manipulate the trump, and then you're trying to use those tokens to your advantage. So there's a lot of game in a little box. Yeah. Also, it's a really nice one to take to a cafe. I've often, if I'm meeting a friend just to catch up, I bring this, you sit down at a cafe, you play it while you're having a coffee or something. Great game.
Well,
Love
this is
game.
interesting because there's another fox-themed, wolf-themed two-player trick-taking game, which is Fox in the Forest, and I love that one.
You do.
And I don't know, I think it just
feels more head-to-head.
It is very head-to-head.
Yeah. So I gave this an 8.5. Which is very, very high. Actually, we haven't rated a lot of our trick-taking games. We've done a lot of top 10s, but not rated a lot of them, so maybe we need to come back and rate them. But it does put it very high in terms of, some great games of all time, not just trick-taking games, but I really, really adore this game.
I will put a bit of a disclaimer that I appreciate the layers of strategy. I think it's a very well-designed game. It's just not at all for me. And so my rating very much just reflects my enjoyment of playing this game. It's a 6.4. So it's a 6.4 for me. Not because I think it's a badly designed game. It's just not at all for me. I do not enjoy.
Well, it's not going anywhere. I might not be able to play it with Maggie, but it's staying in the collection. All right.
So the next game is The Vale of Eternity. Now, this is a game that we sort of overlooked or walked past because it was released at last year's Essen Spiel, and we're like, it looks like there's a lot of card reading and it's not usually our kind of game. But then there was so much a post hype about it. Like so many people were like playing it and loving it. And so
to be fair, there was a lot of hype about it at the time. It did sell out.
It did sell out.
And we were in that line because we were getting Jekyll versus Hyde and some other titles.
Yeah, but it was just like it doesn't look like our kind of game. So that's why we sort of didn't get it at the time. But then there was so much like, no, it's great. It's like, okay, fine, we'll try it out.
I saw it at a board game shop and I was like, okay, I'll buy it.
All right. Yeah. So in Vale of Eternity, you are kind of like monster hunter. So the way it plays out is there's all these different cards with really beautiful illustrations, all these different creatures and monsters and dragons. And so what you're going to be doing is you're going to be going out in hunting, acquiring some of these monsters, and then taming them and summoning them. And they all will have different abilities that allow you to do all sorts of different things. So the way it actually plays out is you have this first sort of phase where every player has 2 tokens, and you're going to be putting them out in turn order. So a snake. Snake, is it a draft? It's like a snake
draft,
placement.
Yeah, so it's like the first player will choose 1, and then the last player will reserve 2, and then it will come back around. Yeah.
So you're just at the first phase, you're just reserving the cards that you're going to be acquiring, and then the second phase, in turn order, you're going to be having the option to either acquire those cards into your hand or discard them for their monetary value. It's got this interesting thing where they all, depending on the type of area that they're in, they will pay or they'll give you a different value in a specific set of tokens. And at any given point, you're only allowed to have 4 tokens.
No matter what their value is.
Yeah, no matter what the value is. So you could have 4 tokens that are 6 value each, or you can have 4 tokens that are only at 1 value each. The way that those tokens come into play is that then in order to summon cards that you have from your hand and play them onto your tableau is you'll need to pay the cost that is shown on the card. So if you just have 4, for 1 value, then it's like you only have 4 coin essentially to spend.
Yeah, but also you get no change in this game. So you've got to manage the economy of your coins or stones, I think they're called, very carefully, because you can get, even if you have all 6s and then you want to, build a cheap card, it's going to cost you 6.
Yeah, exactly. So you're going to be wasting money, I guess, in a way. But then there's this whole other interesting thing of as you're building your tableau, there's going to be some some of the things are going to give you points straight away. So there's a point tracker where you're going to be keeping track of everyone's points. But then some of them will have end of round ability. So they'll allow you to either bring cards back up, which is another interesting thing. It's like you're only allowed to have in your tableau as many cards as the current round. So you can't just like have a super powerful immediate kind of tableau. You can't be going over the round number. So that kind of keeps a ceiling on everyone. And to get rid of cards, you're going to have to pay the amount equal to the round number. So if you go, oh, I really want to play this card, but I have too many cards, you're now having to, it's going to cost you to get rid of cards out there. But it's got this really interesting thing where like some of those cards kind of come back into your hand. Some of the round and round abilities make you discard cards from your hand. And it can feel actually quite tight and have different tensions, but you also can build quite satisfying engines as well.
Yeah,
along the way.
Actually, as you're talking about it, I'm having warm feelings because I really didn't think I was going to enjoy this game. The money economy or the stone economy, and also that restrictive element of the number of cards you can play depending on the round, and then having to pay that cost to get rid of them and replace them means that you spend a lot of time looking at the card combo that you have in your hand and thinking about the order in which you're going to play those cards. And then that can change depending on what your other cards that you're picking up. And also that really difficult decision of all of the cards sound like they have really cool powers, but you need money. And so every now and then you're going to have to discard cards for the money value. Yeah. And then you're just thinking about, well, was that the best move that I could have made? So I actually, the more that I played this game, the more I really enjoyed it. And I can really appreciate why people love this game.
Yeah, why this resonates so much with people.
The only caveat I would say is that because there's, card reading, and because it's all about those combos, this is a game that is going to get better and like really kind of unveil itself, the Vale of Eternity, as you play more games. And so I think it's going to be like harder to teach and get to the table, but then more rewarding if this is a game that you just want to continuously pull out with your group of friends.
Your first couple of experiences are going to be a little bit clunkier because everyone sort of takes stopping, reading all the cards, and then stopping and rereading before you're selecting. You go, wait, what's that one again? So it kind of makes that clunkier. Yeah. But the more you play, the more you, like, it's the same finite kind of deck of cards. So the more you start kind of recognizing, so these are usually this type of abilities.
You get used to that.
Exactly. So it does speed up, and it does allow for them more strategies of going, let me try and go with this and this avenue of these kind of end round cards.
And so two things as well. One is that every time we played a round, we would read out all the cards because they're also placed in a circular fashion, which means that they're not upside down for anyone, but nobody has really a great view of all of the cards. So we would go around and read all of those. And then the second thing I was going to say about it is that it comes with this huge standee that goes in the middle of the board, which is great for visuals.
And they even say
it's like if you're taking a photo,
taking photos, put it in, but it does get in the way of
get in the way.
What's on the other side? What card is that?
So straight away we got rid of that. But the Vale of Eternity really surprised me. I'm giving it a 7.6. I think that it's a really solid title. If you're into this kind of combo card reading, ability type game, then it's a really excellent example of that style of game.
I enjoyed my time with it. It's a 7.4 for me, more because it's like, I think I enjoy myself, but it still plays in a fairly abstract way with like, and when I say abstract, it's like you've got all the different abilities and things, but it just, I don't feel like I'm doing more than just like optimizing for points, in a different way, which I guess is what every game will do, even if it has a theme. But in this one, I found it harder to get myself into the sense of like, it's a world where this is like, no, it's just like I'm optimizing for points and for symbols and for my 4 tokens. So that's Vale of Eternity.
Now, a game that's actually quite similar in style to the Vale of Eternity is Tir Na Nog. And because you're also in this game going to be reserving cards, but this time you're building out a very structured tableau instead of, trying to chain combos and that type of thing. But it is a little bit similar. So we'll talk about this one next. In this game, there's going to be a grid of cards that you are basically trying to put your tokens on to reserve. But what's interesting about this is it is a grid and you place your token between two different cards. And so the players around the table know that you're going to take one of those two cards, but they're not exactly sure of which one. And those spots between the cards can only be reserved by one player. And the way that this works is that the first player is going to have first pick of where that goes. And then we're going to go around and around. Everyone's going to place 3 of their little worker reserving tokens out. And then in reverse turn order, we're actually going to draft those. Now, as you're pulling those cards back, when you're choosing which ones you want to keep, you don't have to play that card necessarily because you also have a hand of cards. But on your turn, you must play one card down into your tableau. And what's happening in your tableau? Well, it's a very puzzly puzzle of number sequencing, very abstract. But each of your rows, and they're going to be the same for all players, is going to have some kind of rule in the way that you're going to place the cards and the way that it's going to score at the end of the game. So for example, in the last game that we played, everybody had the top row where every card that you place must be the same color or number as the card before it. And then at the end of the game, your lowest value card was going to be multiplied by 4. That's the kind of like complexity of these puzzles. And then
that's just one row.
That's just one row. And then the middle row was, well, if this card in this middle row is the second highest card in the column, well, then you're going to score the value of that card. And then the last row, the lowest row in our last game was the one where you want to have the lowest sum of the entire row compared to all players, because then you'll get to score the sum of the points. And if you've got the highest, well, then you're going to get 0.
Essentially,
So there's these really interesting puzzles that are going on, and it's all set up from a deck of cards that has these row puzzles. And so at the beginning of the game, we might pick those out at random, one top, one middle, one bottom, and then everybody else is going to place those same cards. But what's interesting is the interaction between them. So every game feels quite interesting and unique because you can get a different combination of those rows.
There's
and
quite
of course,
a lot of those cards.
There's a lot of them. And even though they're relatively complex, at the same time, they're not difficult to understand. That's one thing that I thought they balanced really well, is that even in the increasing difficulty, the ones that are more challenging, they're still not hard to wrap your head around. So, and then what happens is, as you're trying to fill in all these gaps and to make all of these things interconnect together, each round you're also going to be discarding a card from your hand. So you might have all of these wonderful options that you want to play later, but the round counter for the game is really that discard of a card, and you're getting fewer and fewer, and you're playing across 5 different rounds. And the final piece to all this is that the cards themselves actually have abilities that can affect the puzzle or your tableau. So for example, some cards, when you place them, change the color of the cards next to them. And so that's
or
really
the value of themselves, or all sorts of different elements.
And so you need to be keeping an eye on not just do I want that card, but how is it going to affect my tableau if I play it? And that makes it really interesting because sometimes those things can work for you or against you. And then the final thing is that there's always one overarching objective, which is groups of light colors, the person who has the majority of each colored suit that are connected together orthogonally adjacent to each other in your tableau is going to get points at the end. I found this, again, I love number sequencing. It's just a thing. You know, we had a video recently of Eternal Decks, which has that same kind of, here's a row and here's the rules to that row for playing cards. I find that really satisfying.
I enjoy that in this. I'll take a step back. I love the artwork in this is beautiful, and I love when you have, like, as you're placing cards that are the same color, because kind of like the same location, I think, thematically speaking. It's creating this sort of panorama, and I love that. Because also thematically, it's like you're storytellers and you're going into these lands, and then you're kind of coming back with all these stories. None of that really, for me at least, comes across in the gameplay, because you're just like, I love the beautifulness of the cards, but it is just like a numbers and colors and moving things kind of around. There was no story element for me, even though I did appreciate this, like each one of the conditions, and it could be because I don't know like the folk tales that this is kind of based on. Each one of the rules and conditions has a name, which I imagine is sort of linking back to a particular folk tale or story. And I'm hoping, I don't know because I'm not familiar with the tales, that the scoring condition kind of references that. But because it is largely a number sequencing or colors, and it feels more like an abstract experience for me. Interestingly, those cards that have abilities, because it's only some of them that have them, they trip me up more than they help me, because I actually just wanted to focus on then the colors and the sequence number puzzle. And then having those cards where you're like, that's the number that I need, but wait, what does it do? I don't want that then. Like what? Like it actually then slowed it down even further for me. So it's an interesting experience, I think, for me. I enjoyed my time playing it, but yeah. So what rating are you giving?
Look, I also probably it's one of those games where it's like the more people you have, the more interesting the draft becomes, because there's a tension of who's getting what and the cards. But then, of course, it does introduce more of that randomness of am I going to actually get the card that I want, because there's more people competing over it. Plus, it adds to the downtime a little bit as well. So I don't know. I feel like it's probably best at 3 players. At 2 players, I felt like there probably wasn't enough tension in fighting over cards and that type of thing. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it might be a little bit hard to table. There's not like enough in it that's going to appeal to a large number of people. Like I think if you just like number sequencing, then maybe it's a game you want to try and play solo, because the puzzle of it is really nice. But for me, it's like there's not quite enough that I want to introduce other people into it, even though I find that really fascinating. So with Eternal Decks, it felt like there was more going on around the puzzle that made it interesting, whereas this is much more purely about the puzzle. And the tableau draft thing, it doesn't hook me as much.
Yeah, I haven't actually played this solo, but it's like if a game, as I'm playing it multiplayer, I'm like, I don't feel like this, that it's not grabbing me enough that I want to explore it solo, then it just sort of won't happen. So having said that though, like rating wise.
Yeah, it's still a really great game. I'm giving it a 7.5. I think that there's a lot of people who are just going to enjoy the way that it makes your brain work for that puzzle.
I'm giving it a 7.3. So again, I enjoy my time playing it, but it's not the thing that I would reach for.
Yeah, so that is Tir Na Nog.
All right, the next game that we're going to be going into is Spectacular. So this game is all about creating an animal sanctuary. And so the way it actually plays out is you have your board, and they can either be, they've got, sort of double-sided, so it can be symmetric or asymmetric in terms of the layout of where the tiles are going to be going. And then you also have a whole range of your own sort of personal tiles that represent different animals, and dice, which I believe represent kind of like the food that those animals are going to need or want. You're also going to have this separate little floating tile board that has, again, more tiles and dice that is going to be moved around and passed around between players for drafting different elements from it. So on your turn, you're going to be doing 2 things. One, you're going to be picking one element, so either a tile or a die from your own personal collection, and then one from that collective one, and then very importantly, placing them into their little kind of holding base, because if you don't, it's very easy to forget, wait a second, did I already take the one from here? Did I already? So just put them there, and everybody wait until everyone's ready to do their placing on the actual your actual kind of tableau. So then when you're actually placing them, then you're trying to, again, there's different objectives essentially. So as you're placing them, some of those tiles, the animal tiles, will have requirements of what type of die can go, the value that can go into them. Some of them are just going to be a particular color that needs to go on them. The other element that you might find is that some of them will have a corner that is, if you match 3 corners of the same color that creates a circle, they'll create a watchtower. So the important thing about watchtowers is once you erect one, you're going to be able to put the value 6 die on the tiles that are surrounding it. Aside from that, you're never going to be able to place a value 6. I believe the only exception is usually like everyone has 1 built in their board that has that.
Yeah, and why it's important that you want to place high values is because there are 2 types of main tiles here. The regular tiles, which are just going to hold this value, so perhaps you're placing 6s and 5s, but what's important is when you create a cluster of the same colored tile, you also want want to have multipliers in there. And the multipliers are the breeding tiles. So you need to have these breeding tiles that can only have a 1 or 2 value dice, but the number of breeding tiles that are connected to an orthogonally adjacent group of tiles, that they're going to be the multiplier. So you sum all of the dice in that area, and then you're going to multiply it by the number of breeding dice that are in there. So it is very puzzly as you're playing, because you're trying to think about, like, do I want to take on another multiplier? Am I going to be able to place a 1 or 2 dice? Because if you get the tile but you don't get the right die that you need, well, guess what? It's going to do nothing at the end of the game.
Interestingly, there's also this sort of midway scoring, which is like a tickets, or like your entry. So every board has an entry point to your sanctuary, and so you're going to get the sum of all the tiles that are attached or adjacent to it, connected to it, the dice value on those tiles. So it becomes this sort of thing of like, oh, early on, I do want to try and get some high values connected to my entry, because this is what my visitors are going to be able to kind of see. But then that's different to then the end game scoring. There's also variable objectives that you can add to the game, which then might mean that you're also working personally, individually on other things and other combinations that you're trying to get. So there's a lot of like really kind of, and also the other scoring thing is like total number of unique animals that can give you quite a number of points if you manage to get, I think it's like, what's the highest, like 17 different animals.
Yeah.
So that's another objective type that you could be going for. So there's different layers of strategy that you can be tackling.
And there's things that I liked about this game, and there are things that I liked less about this game. That, you know, I enjoy that there's this simultaneous draft. I really like that the board is moving around the little player board that has the tiles.
It's like a raft.
Yeah,
it's just it's like it's floating between players.
Yeah, and you can see what's coming, and you can think about, you know, if I take this instead of that, is it going to make it all the way back around to me? Like, which one do I want to take now versus later? I think that's why a lot of people think it's best at 2. I also had that feeling, because when I played it at 2, I had like perfect information almost about what I was sending away and what was going to come back. So if I sent, you know, 2 of the same die value away, I knew that Maggie could only draft 1 of those, and so when it comes back, the other one's still going to be there. So that made it easier to plan ahead. The other thing about this game is that it sits in a weird weight place, I think, because it's actually like quite challenging to explain what you need to do, probably more so than I would like for, you know, like a kind of lighter tile placement game. And then what I thought was interesting, that when you add in the personal objectives, those objectives are really hard.
Yes.
Which is great if you're like a heavy gamer and you can kind of wrap your head around all the things that you're trying to do. But those are going to be, I think, maybe a step too far for the players who are going to be attracted to the original game or the core game. So it's kind of interesting for me. It's one that I would maybe not reach for in order to teach people, because of the degrees of complexity in it. Also, I found that I didn't really care what anybody else was doing.
Yeah.
I just, throughout this game, I was like, aside from, are you going to take that? And what's the likelihood of you taking that? I didn't really like feel
It's usually
invested.
a plus for me, because I'm more of a multiplayer solo
you don't
test.
care
Like,
what I'm doing.
I'm just more like, you know, creating my own little puzzle. But I think for me, ultimately, it's like, it just felt more abstract than, you know, it's like,
Sometimes it took people like a while to think about what they're going to do. And I found those moments really boring.
Like drag on.
So for me, I gave it a 7.1, which is a little bit lower than some of these other titles that are in a similar vein.
Pretty similar. I gave it a 7.2 for very, very similar reasons. So that's spectacular. I can't even say it. Spectacular.
And the next game, maybe we'll grab it from your side, is Nocturne, which is by Flat Out Games. It's the next in the series of, you know, Cascadia and Calico and all of those great puzzly little tile layers. This one is fascinating in the way it works. It's actually one of the more unique mechanics that I've experienced in a tile laying game in a while, because again, like a lot of the games in this video, you are drafting from a central grid. And this time you are trying to collect tiles that are going to not really be laid down into a puzzle, but it's a set collection game. So you're trying to get different sets that are going to score in different ways. But the way that you're going to gain them is super interesting. So everybody has a range of bidding tokens that have different values on them. I think they range from 1 to 7 at the start. Plus you've got this star token that is always
that is
always going to be be like your trump. Like I can absolutely beat all of you in this bid. But what's interesting about this game is the first player is going to play their lowest token onto one of the tiles in the grid. The next player in turn order has to bid higher and can only bid on the tiles that are immediately adjacent to the tile that was first bid on. And so what you end up doing is creating this chain of tokens throughout the grid of tiles. But on your turn, you have to think about, well, do I really care enough about any of the tiles that are adjacent to that I want to bid higher? Because if you win it, two things. One, you gain that tile, of course, you bring it into your little set collection game. But two, you're going to lose the token that you used to bid on that tile. So you're going to take the tile and then you're going to flip over the token and your marker stays out there as this is a tile that's been taken by this player. Now that is important because throughout the 2 rounds of this game, there are going to be different objectives that relate to the pattern that you're creating with the tokens that you're leaving behind. So it's not only the case that you may want to win it for the tile, but also to achieve a particular objective that requires you to have, a certain number of tokens connected together that you're leaving behind. So that's the first really interesting element. The second thing is that if you are bidding and you are not successful, you get those tokens back, which is good because then you can use them to bid again. But if you want to, you can sacrifice that token as well and place it onto a board that's separate, that is basically for the end of the first round and the end of the second round. The highest ranked tokens that are in this leftover type area are going to be able to choose from a range of other tiles that were randomly placed there at the start of the game.
Drafting round.
Bonus drafting round.
Of tiles that you already know what they're going to be.
Yeah. But if someone places a higher token than you at some point in the game there, your token's going to get bumped down. And so you're trying to stay up in the rankings as well for those bonus tiles. But anyway, fascinating way of drafting tiles for the set collection. The other thing is at the end of the first round, not only are we going to, score those objectives for the first round, but also you're going to then trade away chips that you have left over, and the person with the chips that have the highest value because you've sacrificed playing those to win tiles, you're going to exchange them for even higher valued tiles that you can use in the second half of the game.
If you've been frugal and not been just spending your highest chips, you're going to be rewarded with even higher value chips.
And so the different tiles there are classic set collecting things. So you've got you've got mushrooms where you want to have, as many as you can with the same type of mushroom. You've got feathers.
But some of them it's like the whole, so if you have 1, it's 3 points. If you have 2, it's 0 points. Or if you have 3, it's 9 points. So it's a very delicate balance of how many you might have. It reminded me a lot of that particular part, fungi or morels. Is it morels or morels? I can never remember which way. That sort of mushroom kind of collecting and having the right kind of set. And then there's others that are just majority thing.
There's eggs where you want to have the majority of eggs to get the most points. And then there's these also potion cards that you can collect along the way, and they relate to the symbols that are on the tiles themselves and whether you can get the right collection of symbols. So there is plenty to think about in this game. And it really surprised me actually because I think it is a little bit more complex than some of the other games in the catalog from Flat Out Games. So it is a really intriguing puzzle. And the bidding element is just really clever. I really appreciated that. When I played this, I was like, this feels really different. And different can be good in that, if you play a lot of games, this is going to really stand out from the rest of the games in your collection. And being really different is also going to make it maybe a little bit harder to get to the table with, people who are newer to gaming because there's a lot of layers of strategy that goes on here, but it's a really nice step up. And I will start by saying that I like this more than Cascadia. And I like it more than Verdant as well. So it's kind of maybe not as good. I love Calico, so that's pretty high.
Always going to be
And I love Fit to Print as well because of the real time. But this one, a little bit lower than those. I would give it a 7.7. I just think that it's a really fun, fascinating mechanic.
I give this a 7.5 because again, I appreciate that. that bidding. I don't usually like bidding, but it's quite an interesting. It's just kind of that creating that little kind of snake sort of form, and then having those leftovers. I think maybe, as you said, it's like having those stages, because it's like there's this bidding stage, and then there's the leftover stage, and then there's also like you're thinking like,
and then changing your chips over, and then the end of the game, if you've got chips left over, you get points for those too. So there's just so much to think about.
Yeah, there's more. It's more complex than a Cascadia, where it's like you're pretty much just doing like, once you know the flow, you're doing that the whole game, and then that's kind of it.
Yes.
So I do enjoy this more than Cascadia as well. And I think also as well more than Verdant, which actually I liked okay, but like and it's beautiful. I really love the fox, the illustration of these different foxes, which are your characters that also have an asymmetric ability if you choose to use it. So that is Nocturne. So the next game that we're going to be looking at is a gorgeously illustrated game called Flock Together. This is a cooperative game illustrated by Andrew Bosley, which is why it's just immediately like just draws you in with these gorgeous little critters of all types. In Flock Together, it's cooperative, so we are playing as the coop of chooks that are trying to protect ourselves from all these predators that are trying to come and eat us or harm us in some way. And so we're going to each one have our own adorable little booklet representing the evolution of our own individual chook, and as they eat, so if you kind of eat enough, get fed enough, you're going to grow to your next level, which means that you're usually going to be more powerful, you're going to have more capacity for health and all these things. So it is very much one of those games where we will have at the start of the game, we'll kind of usually randomize different again in books, each one of the predators or the rivals that we're going to be fighting and trying to defeat, and then there's going to be one sort of ultimate boss, the final boss, that we won't know who they are, but when they do eventually reveal themselves, they're going to be quite sort of powerful and tricky to beat. The other kind of mini bosses that we're trying to defeat along the way, they also evolve. So at the start of the game, they're on their kind of more basic level, but if we don't defeat them as the game evolves, they're going to get stronger and harder to beat. There are also these little, I can't remember what they're called, the other not bosses, it's like the grubs, I think, that you can defeat to help you. Essentially, they're easier to defeat, but they just help you level up.
They give you powers that you can use as a one-off ability, and you can kind of talk together amongst yourselves about when you want to use that to get its best power. I love the cards that you can get as well.
Yeah, the bonus cards.
The bonus cards. Yeah.
I enjoy in this game. You have this sort of central, like there's actions that you can take inside the coop, and then there's actions that you can take when you're out in the forest. And thematically, it makes sense. The things that, like, if you're healing up or if you're doing sort of certain things that they have to be done in the coop, but then for like hunting and getting food and resources or fighting, it's usually done outside. So so you've got your board with that reminds you of what are all the different action types that you can do during your turn and where they would need to take place.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing is this game is played across seasons, and there are weather events that are going to impact you along the way as well. And so you're keeping an eye on that. There's a nice timing element to the game as well, because if you don't defeat some of these predators, they are going to get stronger towards the end of the game. So you want to try and chip away at them. So chip away at them. Peck away at them slowly. But there's this really collective element of resource management. I feel like this game, underneath it all, is really about resource management. It's about the food tokens that you need in order to attack. You also need them in order to heal yourself. You're going to be spending them in a multitude of ways. And so I think that is really what creates the tension in this game. And when we played this, you do feel like it's coming close to the wire in terms of whether you're going to make it through the challenge or not. And so I think that's a good marker of a good game.
It is one of those games where you are just talking the whole way through, so it can lend itself to like alpha gaming, where someone's like, no, this is the obvious thing that we're going to do that, and then we're going to do that. Because you don't really have, there's not really like hidden information that you have from one another. But that can be good. So it really depends on your kind of gaming preference. I love the sheer amount of chick-related or chicken-related puns in here, and even the names of the characters and of the villains. It's quite an amusing experience. The production as well is also really, really beautiful. One criticism is that you have all these different food types and food tokens, but they all do the same thing. So it's like, it kind of feels like a missed opportunity. I know that there's going to be an expansion as well. I don't know if it's already live or if it's coming up. So I'm curious to see what that kind of introduces and how it sort of,
I think if you're looking for a cooperative game to play with your family or group of friends that aren't into, you know, maybe like being in a dungeon and fighting all that fantasy level, this has charm in spades.
Very endearing.
Andrew Bosley's illustrations combined with what you're doing, the puns, and the fact that it is quite challenging to manage your own character as well as what they're doing out in the world to help the group. I just think this is such a wonderful design that I wish resonated with me more, because I don't really like this kind of open cooperative kind of experience.
It's not really our style usually.
No, not at all. And I also don't like battling. And even in this game where it's really cute, I still don't love I'm going to do this hit and I'm going to take this damage. That's not really what I like in board games. And so for me, I'm kind of sad about the fact that, you know, I don't want to play this more, even though this is going to make so many gamers happy. I can see the you know, all the thoughtfulness that went into this design. And so I actually really, really appreciated it, even though it's not my style. I'm giving it a 7, and that's not, you know, nothing on the reflection of the design of the game. It's just not for me. But I didn't hate my time playing it, put it that way, which normally I would in this style of game.
For a co-op, that says a lot. That's quite a feat. For me, it's a 7.8, so it is considerably higher. I really, really, I love the production. I love but again, the gameplay, it's more that, it's not just the co-op thing, because you can solo this, and it's like, it just sort of, the scaling is very, very simple, because it's just usually with the health of the villains and things like that, it's just a multiplier by the number of players. So very, very easy to scale. The only thing with this is I don't really tend to enjoy just the attacking as the core mechanic, and that's essentially what you're doing here. It's just going, oh, you're battling this and you're battling that, because it's you're protecting your what do you call it? A group of chickens? I don't know, your coop. So
your flock.
Flock together. It's right in the box.
It's in the title.
So it's an adorable game. I think it's going to really resonate with the right kind of type of audience, as Amy said. But it's one that I'm keen to kind of continue to explore a little bit of it solo. It's probably not going to be a co-op experience in our house for that. Yeah, it's going to be a solo experience. But again, it's that thing of like the battling being the main mechanic.
But it's going to be a painful one to move out of our collection, because it is so beautiful and just really well done. So if you do like battling in that style of game, by all means, check out Flock Together.
All right. The next game.
Next game.
It's Butterfly Gardens.
This actually is a reprint or remake of an older Reina Knizia game. So this game is actually coming out at Essenspiel. So this is a bit of an early look at Butterfly Garden in its newest form.
Yes.
And this is classic Reina Knizia. And it's a very simple game as well, because all you're going to be doing is you're creating these paths for butterflies to escape out of this I don't know what it's called. What is it called? What you're trying to get them out of?
The central area. I don't know if they're trapped anywhere.
I don't know what thematically it's called.
They're just moving out onto your particular areas, because all of the different players have like target zones essentially that they want the butterflies to exit through. Exit via the gift shop.
There's not a lot of theme here.
Yeah, it's a very abstract,
But essentially, you start with these 3D butterflies that are sitting in the center tile as well as around the outside as well, and they're all worth different values. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to create a path that butterfly will travel through to exit out one of the exits that has
one
your
of your
colored
gift shops.
Yeah,
I'm saying gift shop.
that has one of your colored tokens on it. And so there is an exit that you is only yours, and so you want to try and get as many butterflies through that exit, so you're the only one getting those butterflies. But if you go out an exit that you share with another player, well, they're going to get that butterfly as well. And this game is really all about disrupting people's paths. So as you place a tile, if there's a butterfly that's on an adjacent tile next to it, that butterfly is going to move through the path as far as it can. So you are constantly going, no, that butterfly's headed that way. I'm going going to do a little curve here. Yeah, and the butterfly.
Tokyo drift.
Drift the butterfly back around to your side of the board. And also there's another really interesting mean kind of mechanic where if you connect two butterfly paths to each other and a butterfly is traveling in either direction, well, they clash with each other and they fly away.
Yeah.
So a good tactic
They just vanish. Like in real life, it's true. If two butterflies touch each other, they vanish.
They vanish. That's exactly what happens. Yeah. But that is a really great tactic for if there's butterflies that are all the way over the other side of the board and it looks really unlikely that you're actually going to get any points from those butterflies. Well, then if you make them collide together, you make sure that nobody else is getting
hate route.
Hate route. Yeah,
it's a new term. TM.
And this game was all about hate routing. This is a very mean game because
rerouting. I actually really enjoy sometimes once in the later stages of the game when you have a really, really big sort of web of routes to all of a sudden place a tile such that this butterfly manages to do like this acrobatic turn and go all the way around to the other end of the where it's like what just happened? So it's like that can be quite satisfying.
I almost had a butterfly. Now Maggie stole it.
That can be quite satisfying because I even had games where like my entire game was not even moving the butterfly. It was just like I was creating the mega web to then like refunnel as many of these butterflies at the last minute back into my area. So there is a lot of potential for a lot of kind of strategy. It's obviously very, very abstract.
Yeah. But for me, this game, it's like fun when I play it. It's like for what it is though, it's a fairly light, very one-note game that is, in my opinion, taking up a bit of like shelf space for the level of enjoyment that I'm getting out of this game. Because this game is a filler for me. It's a game where it's just like, okay, we'll bring this out, we'll play one game and everyone will laugh and probably have a good time. It's pretty easy to teach.
Extremely easy to teach. So it's one of those like very accessible type
straight
games.
away, you know what you're doing.
Any non-gamer will be able to kind of start to get and be like, but it can be mean.
Yeah, and there was a game, a two-player only game called Fairy Trails by Uwe Rosenberg, which to me has a similar feel where you're like just trying to, create these paths and it's like very head-to-head. It can be a little bit mean. Yeah. This game is essentially that for more players. So for me, there's a limit to how much I'm going to get out of this game. So I gave it a 7. I just think it's like, it's nice, it's light. Do I need to keep it in my collection? Probably not.
Yeah, it's a 7.2 for me. Similar reasons, very, very abstract. I haven't had a bad time playing because you kind of go, this sort of mean thing. But it's a tough market out there, especially
for Reina Knizia titles, just amongst his titles.
It's like try and rank those. That's that's a whole series all over time.
It really is. So that is Butterfly Gardens, and no, it's called Butterfly Garden. There is one garden.
There's only one garden,
but there's two gardens here.
Yes,
or multiple gardens. It's Wild Gardens.
Oh, Wild Gardens.
That was such a great segue.
That was a great segue. I didn't even realize that we had two gardens games. Anyways, Wild Gardens is all about foraging, like being out in nature, foraging for different ingredients, and then cooking with delicious recipes with those ingredients that you forage to, even better, feed them and serve them to guests and your friends and sort of make friends along the way. So it's a very literal move around and recipe fulfill recipes actually literally feed to your guests.
But it's a little bit more complex than that because you have this range of like workers that essentially you are using on your own player board to take actions, but each of these workers has a value associated with it. That's going to be the number of steps you're going to take around essentially this rondel type system or on a path, a garden path.
Yeah.
And wherever you land, there's two things. One, it's going to have certain types of items that you can forage. So there'll be some mushrooms, maybe there's some berries, and that's going to dictate what you can collect, as well as the skills that you might be able to learn as well that relate to that ingredient as well, because you can upgrade your worker actions with
by
these
studying,
skills.
Going to the library and studying.
Yeah. The other thing is that some of the spaces have a picnic table, and it's only the spaces that have a picnic table on them where you're able to either cook or feed someone, cater to somebody's needs.
Perfect thematic sense.
It does.
Yes.
And so there is a market of cards that are the recipes that are all different types of foods. I actually really love the diversity and range of foods
Yeah.
and characters that are in this game. And Rose Gauntlet always do a great job of that. But it really, there is so much variety there. And, you know, the ingredients that go in, you're like, oh, that kind of makes thematic sense.
Yeah.
And it's really, and then as well as what the people are asking
and
for.
also, it's just beautiful. Like
It
the
is really
illustrations of this, like everything about it is just so gorgeous. And the characters themselves, some of them are really quirky and cute. And so you're like, you just get so, even if it makes no sense based on the
For your
things that you
strategy.
have. Yeah, it's like, I'm just so invested now in this cute pup that has a monocle. Like I must have it. So yeah, it kind of lends itself to that as well. So it's an interesting game in that the gameplay sits in an interesting spot where it's what you're doing is fairly straightforward, but it can be a little bit complex in that as you're placing, so you have your, as Amy said, you have your different kind of worker tokens. As you're placing them, you're having to decide which one of those, so they all have different numbers. That number is going to relate to the steps that they're going to be taking. But also, you're very limited into, well, what type of action am I going to commit that to? And then go, oh, maybe I want to, in the earlier part of the games, maybe I want to study and level up, so add those skill tokens so that whenever I go into an action column, that becomes more powerful. I have more variety, or I have more ways of getting points just by being next to particular ingredients or extra foraging. So it can lend itself to do a lot of different things, which might be a little bit more complex for like a beginner kind of new players. I'll also say it also has an incredible solo mode where all of these characters, if you're playing multiplayer, all of these characters have a little number bubble on them that has no role in a multiplayer game. But if you're playing solo, there's a whole booklet of all these different scenarios that actually call for particular guests to have in play. And then as you're serving them, you go into read the number bubble for their character, and it has complete storylines that then branch off, and then go. So now you're bringing in additional guests, or you're bringing these particular types of things, and they actually vary as well in difficulty. So this is a game that I enjoyed multiplayer, but the solo experience is actually really, really rich. And then what it meant is when I went back to a multiplayer game, I now have a full background story for what these characters. Yeah. So it's like it actually even it deepened my relationship with it.
And look, you know, it is a lighter style game, but there's a couple of really interesting mechanical things that I want to talk about. One is that there's a victory point system that has two tracks. So one track is your straight up victory points. The other are these jars, and the jar points actually skip levels on those. So they actually, if you get more jars, you're actually accumulating victory points at a quicker rate. Now that's really interesting because you're going to sum those two together at the end. There's another element that I really like, which is at the end of each day, you're going to lose one of your workers. So you're going to allocate one of your workers to get a bonus, but you don't get that worker for the next round, which means you have fewer turns in the following day, but also you've sacrificed one of your numbers. And there's also one other element, which is as you're moving around the path, when it's a multiplayer game and there's, you know, a few people, it's interesting because if you go 4 steps, you don't count any spots where another player is in that spot. So essentially you jump them and you don't count that space, and that leads to really annoying outcomes when someone gets in your way, because you're like, okay, I'm saving this worker, which is going to give me 4 steps, which will land me right on that picnic table, and then, oh no, someone has moved out in front of me, and now I'm going to overshoot that picnic table. And that can be really frustrating. And I do think that people are either going to love or hate that part of the mechanic, because it does kind of hamper the way that you can think.
Well, you start getting in each other's way, and it makes it less predictable. Then.
But it does mean that, you know, if you upskill yourself, so you have the little boot that allows you to go -1 or +1, well, that's going to help offset that element of the game. So there are a lot of nice pieces that come together in this game. I think that, you know, this game is quite long for the weight of this game, but I would say that if you like a cozy game experience, this has coziness in spades.
Oozing coziness.
It is oozing coziness. It is a game where if you like living and being in this world, well, then you're just going to enjoy that it is a long game, because you get to go on different adventures, you're collecting ingredients, the people you meet along the way. Like, they've done a really beautiful job of this.
Relaxing delight of, well, and I say relaxing, but then if you're playing some through some of those solo scenarios, it can be quite tricky. So you're like, oh, like you've got different goals, and they give you sort of different milestones and things, as well as particular quests. So quite charmed.
But I will say that, is cozy a place I want to be when I'm playing games? No, I want to be deeply uncomfortable. I want to have tension and spades. And so for me, this game is a little bit too breezy. You know, what you're doing on your turn is a little bit, you know, for me, it got better the more I played it, because, you know, then I could understand like the layers of strategy, which are there, but it is a slower moving game. It's, you know, by its design, you can't do too much on your turn.
Yes.
And so you are just kind of waiting for everyone to play out their turn. And I did sometimes feel like I was like, oh, a little too cozy.
Okay.
A little too cozy. So for me, it's a 7.4. I just think that if you like the style of game, it's going to be for you. But again, just one that's probably less my
that's
world.
fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
More no surprise. For me, it's a lot higher. It's an 8.2 for me. I really enjoyed. Like, I love how beautiful. Like the table presence of this game is just gorgeous.
We have the deluxe bits as well.
Yeah. So they're wooden tokens. Even without the wooden tokens, even if you just have the cardboard tokens for the ingredients and for the randomization, like it's just. That's good. Obviously, it's really nice to have that extra little deluxe bit, but it's still gorgeous without it. Love the amount of effort that has gone into all that solo book of all those solo scenarios, and the scaling of all the different, so, you know, they don't have to be played in order, and the difficulties of those, and then even all the different things that you can aim for. So,
but if you're looking for a game that's like Gateway Plus and still has that like cozy feel that you can play with the family, I think this is a great title. Also, there's an expansion pack that we are in. We are in. There's a ThinkerThemer card, and as well there is a chai card as well, because Maggie loves chai, and so they put that into the game, which is incredible. And it just really is a, you know, beautiful production. So that is Wild Gardens.
And the next game and final game that we're going to be talking about today,
I feel like we've been here forever.
We have been here since the dawn of time.
So is this series. This series is never going to end.
It will never end.
No.
Yeah. So it's Endeavour Deep Sea. So Endeavour Deep Sea is all about going on different expeditions.
With your submarine,
like going into the depths and doing conservation and doing some research and diving and using your sonar and all sorts of different things. It's the type of game where you'll start with your own. Everyone has their own individual board with all these different tracks, and so with these tracks, really interestingly, the tracker for the game is at the start of every round, you're going to recruit a new specialist. And one of the tracks is the level of, I believe it's like your reputation of the level of recruit that you're going to be able to attract. So you start with only level 1s, which are very basic. And those are going to be essentially your worker placement spots, where you're going to be able to place these sort of discs to activate a particular action. Now, the other thing that you're going to be doing is you're going to be gaining more discs. That's its own other track of going, okay, so if I evolve that track, I'm going to be able to get more discs to take more actions. But if I don't have enough spots for those actions to go to, those discs are going to be wasted. The discs get used in a couple of ways. One is placing the disc on the specialist to take an action, but there are some actions that require you to place additional discs on the actual board, which is being formed as we kind of progress through the game. So as we're kind of diving deeper or exploring more with our, you know, with our actions. Then there's also going to be another track that is about releasing or retrieving those worker discs, which if you don't move that up too much, you're going to be leaving worker discs behind.
I messed that up in the last game, because not only do you need to get this, you know, the engine up and running to get more discs, but you also need to be clearing them, otherwise you have nowhere to place them.
Yourself. Yeah. So that's another interesting thing. And then you start kind of going and taking your actions. So so interestingly, I love the fact that as you're taking actions, you always start with like your team leader that is like the one tile that has every action that you could take in the game. So you kind of always want to make sure that you clear that that disc. So it'll give you options for all sorts of things. But also you've got your submarines. There's a whole track that is that that submarine track that determines how many steps, if you're moving your submarine, how far that submarine can go, and also how deep it can go. Because the deeper you go, usually the more interesting the explorations that you're going to be doing, the more benefits you get for exploring and discovering those tiles. So there's a lot of really interesting things going on. And then there's also some of the spots that you can go to, those conservation spots, which will give you different benefits. Sometimes it'll be advancing on those tracks. So everything kind of feeds back into itself.
It's all very interconnected. And what I really love about this game is every time you play it, it's a particular mission. So a mission is set up, and the mission is going to define the number of tiles that it can be placed across, not how deep it can go, but how large it's going to be across, and also the starting tiles that are going to give you usually some sense of what the objectives are for this particular mission. And then every mission, when you're playing, you can play this competitively or cooperatively. We have only played it competitively, as you can imagine. But then there are 3 different types of objectives that you're trying to work towards for that particular mission. And I just really enjoyed that every time we had a new mission, I was like, oh, okay, this one's all about researching. And that makes sense that when we're picking tiles, we probably want to get the ones that have more research, and then we're all going to be competing over those finite spots. And so maybe I need to go deeper with my submarine to access new areas that other people can't access. So that's going to impact which of my tracks I'm going to move up. Maybe it's going to impact the new workers that I'm going to kind of bring in, or the new action tiles that I'm going to get at the start of every round. So you're thinking a lot about the strategy, and there's a limitation to how much you can move and how much you can do and how many discs you're getting every round. So there's just like, it feels like your hands are tied in a lot of ways, and you're just trying to like, build that engine quickly.
I enjoy that interconnectedness of those tracks, because a lot of things will then, it's like there's this whole other board as well where you're placing these sort of star discs, and the research that is kind of like you can kind of build up, unlocking bonuses. Sometimes those bonuses are going to be moving up ahead in those tracks. Sometimes there's spots where they're going to give you points, but as you're building that out, you're reaching the edges of that, whatever that board is going to be, and you're getting more valuable rewards. But other people, you can kind of, like, if Amy has done, and this happened in one of the games where like I had done a lot of work spreading out the network, and then Amy gets to start going, which thematically makes sense. It's like a lot of, if someone's doing a lot of research, you're going to be able to cite that research and go with the knowledge of that research and go and take those
victory points.
So
take the victory points for myself.
We all get our own victory points in different ways. So I really enjoy the focus on that sort of conservation with this. I really enjoy the synergies with the tracks and trying to figure out, I messed up this game where like I just, I was producing a lot of those tokens, but I didn't have the spaces to put them on. Some of the cards that you can collect along the way, which you'll need money for, and that sort of money or research DNA is like the icon for it. In order to acquire that, you need to go diving. So it's like, so there's this, and sometimes those cards have their own worker placement spots in them. So that's excellent, because it's giving you more places to put your disc. I really thoroughly enjoy that, and I feel like I've only just discovered, just cracked the surface.
And what's really nice is that even when you replay a mission, because players are exploring and getting new see tiles, they're choosing which one to place. So they'll get the option of 2, and they'll be like, okay, we're going to place this one. The map is always different. And so that's going to make it feel like even with the same mission, it's a little bit different every game, which I really appreciate. This game, I felt the one thing is that I loved all the interconnectedness. I think the mechanics are kind of on point. Everything is a little bit small. So I found that like, for someone who doesn't like fiddliness in games, the size of everything, the scale of everything felt a bit small. The text is a little bit small on the mission card. But then because this is such a sprawling game, there's probably no other way they could have fit it in a box this size with all of that variability that I talked about. It's a trade-off, because it's going to be building out with all these tiles. You can't have those too big, or they wouldn't fit on the table. And so everything needs to be smaller in scale. And so That is one thing that I don't know if everybody will love. For me, it made it feel like I had to work harder to engage with the game on the table and to keep track of what was going on because everything's just a little bit smaller. I don't know if that's just an Amy thing.
That didn't bother me at all. I will agree the text on the missions is very, very small, but because you're not having to refer to it all that often, it didn't. But you're right.
But there's a lot of stuff going on the map once you build it up, and so everything is a little bit more crammed in.
Like the iconography was pretty decent.
Yes,
like it was pretty good, and some of the some of those cards where you know those sort of cards that you can attain, the iconography is quite big on those ones, so you can see very easily what you're going to get, and some of the cards will actually have a benefit for everyone else as well. So so overall, what's your rating?
My rating is 7.8, which if you've been playing along, 7.8 is the same score that I gave Tapestry. It gives me the same feel with the tracks and what you're trying to like upgrade, like that kind of Tapestry feel. This one I think could have been maybe even higher, but just some of the elements, it doesn't click as well with my brain. Especially because the map is evolving, and so the planning ahead thing is more limited because you don't know what's going to come out next. But some people will really love that element of surprise and change every time. But 7.8 is a very solid game. I think people are going to enjoy it.
It's considerably higher. It's an 8.5. I really enjoy my time playing
this game. It's your lone wolf.
It is fun for this episode. I really enjoy this game. It's interesting because it has a cooperative mode, which is the same as the solo mode. I don't know if I'm as attracted to like playing the solo, even though I really enjoy my time multiplayer. Having said that, I haven't actually had a chance to play the solo mode of this, so I can't say. But it's like I'm not necessarily like curious about it because I just really enjoy exploring it with other people, not co-op, like still competitive. So, but I will still try it, and I'll have to maybe put a little update.
It is very.
Once I do.
You know what's interesting in this game? It feels like you're. Maybe because all of what you're doing is on the board and not in front of people, you're very engaged in what everybody else is doing, and you're very quick to take the thing that you know that I'm going to probably take next round. Like you're very competitively attuned to what's going on.
I think having all those submarines and you know where people are at, and also there's finite things in each area, so in each tile on the board. So you go, there's only one diving token left there. So if I don't take it, Amy might take it, or maybe I'm better off just moving somewhere else. So I kind of did enjoy that. For someone who's very much a multiplayer solitaire, usually it just has that little touch of extra, like make me worry about the state of the board. And I think that, so it's counter to like Wild Gardens, where it's like you're playing a scenario. That one's more like discovery. This one, I think with the scenarios, is more like challenges. There's particular things that you're trying to achieve. I tend to not be as attracted by that when you're trying to beat a particular a goal or objective in that sense. But,
and as just to say, we haven't played the original Endeavour, so we can't compare it to that. But this is a wonderful game, and we're glad to have it in our collection.
Endeavour Deep Sea.
Endeavour Deep Sea, that is another 10 games out of the way, but they're all new. They're all coming in the door, and they are not slowing down. So it's going to be a really busy end to 2024, I feel. There are so many games coming up for Essen. So, I hope this helps you choose wisely with your purchases, and through our experiences, know what games may or may not suit you. But if you enjoyed this video, please hit like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll be back with more board game content soon. But otherwise, bye for now.
Bye.